a couple things stand out, and I was just on Golf Central doing a quick recap on the scrum that the commissioner had with reporters, and he also met with our very own Kira K. Dixon afterwards for a really interesting live to tape. I would suggest everyone go check that out. But a couple of things, obviously, it focused on last week's meeting between Commissioner Monahan, Adam Scott, who is a player director on the policy board, and the President of the United States, Donald Trump. It was in the Oval Office. I was told by the commissioner that this was initiated by the tour. The tour reached out to the White House trying to get this meeting arranged. It lasted about 40 minutes in the Oval Office. And I was taken by the idea that to hear the commissioner describe that meeting, it was very much layered. So I was trying to drill down into sort of the minutia of it all. Was this really just about the Department of Justice investigation into the tour for possible antitrust violations, an investigation that's been going on for years now, or predates the framework agreement, or was this more about the negotiations between the tour and the Public Investment Fund? And the answer was, frankly, yes. It involved everything. It was a very layered conversation. I was taken by a couple things that the commissioner said about it, and he kind of referenced the release that they sent out afterwards about this is one step closer to reunifying the game, and that's really the most important thing here. We can get into all the nuts and bolts, the machinations of exactly how the financial terms are going to play out, exactly what the tour is going to look like if and when the two sides come back together. But I think the commissioner really went to the president with a simple idea that this isn't good for either side, PGA Tour or Live Golf. This isn't a PGA Tour problem or a Live Golf problem. This is a professional golf problem, and the only way to solve it is to find a way to bring the sides back together. So I think, by and large, that's as optimistic as I have seen the commissioner on this topic in a long time.
I'm very curious what your read on that is, Rex, because it was sort of assumed if the PGA Tour was going to the White House to sort of petition President Trump in person, it had to do with the Department of Justice. Let's rubber stamp this. Let's get this deal, at least the financial part, finalized and formalized. What about the reunification of the game? In what way could President Trump help that along?
I had a chance, and I just sent this to Fred if he wants to put that quote up there so I don't misquote it here. But I asked Rory specifically about why he thought it was important that the tour was able to meet with the president. And Rory sort of drilled down to probably the most important point of why you would want Donald Trump involved. And that's not only can the president reach out to Yasser Al-Rumayyan, the governor of the Public Investment Fund, who has been at the center of these negotiations with the tour, he can reach out to Yasser's boss, who of course would be the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And that carries a lot of weight when you can talk to not just the governor of the Public Investment Fund on a very quick phone call, but also, I'm going to be calling your boss about this in a few moments. Nothing motivates people.
Always works.
Like it always seems to work. And I'll actually answer both because, like I said, it was interesting how layered it was. On the Department of Justice front, it is fascinating that the president probably didn't even have to make a phone call on this. All that needed to happen is for who's ever in charge of this investigation over at the DOJ to look down and see the headlines that, the tour met with the president in the White House this week. Well, let's move this along. And I know that's not most people's version of the American justice system. And I understand that. That's a much bigger conversation. But as it applies to golf and where we are right now, I think that in itself is going to expedite these talks. But more than anything, I think, and again, this goes back to what the commissioner told me, one step closer, but it is a big step.
It certainly is. We'll get into what Roy McIlroy had to say. He has played golf with President Trump recently, as did Tiger Woods on Sunday in South Florida. What else, Rex, was discussed? What was top of mind with Commissioner Monahan in his meeting with the press?
The commissioner was asked specifically about what would a reunified game look like. It's the billion-dollar question or multi-billion-dollar question that we all have. And there were no details, and I wouldn't expect that. And I actually asked the commissioner point blank, is the version of a potential agreement between the tour and the Public Investment Fund that they submitted to the Department of Justice, is that just the financial terms, or is it the whole picture? Is this the financial terms and exactly what the sides are going to look like and how the two tours are either going to become one or remain separate or whatever it is professional golf's going to look like whenever this happens? And again, I'm assuming this is going to happen. It's still very much in the air. And I'm going to write this column after this, and it's something I think you and I touched on the Sunday podcast, and I said it because I keep going back to Tim Pincham, who was Jay Monahan's predecessor as commissioner of the PGA Tour. And I don't know how many times people described him to me, people on the inside, on the know, as a benevolent dictator. And it always made my skin crawl a little bit because no one wants to hear that term. No one wants to think of golf being controlled by one sort of omnipresent person who's pulling all the strings and calling all the shots. I've come around, though, on this particular subject that Jay or whoever who is going to be his replacement as essentially the CEO of the PGA Tour Enterprises, that person's going to have to be a benevolent dictator. Because you can sit and talk to 72 players in this field here at Torrey Pines this week, and I would probably get 72 different versions of what they'd like to see the game become. And the same thing would probably happen this week in Adelaide at the Live Golf event. I could ask all 52. Am I getting that right? They have 52 players in the field? No, I'm showing my ignorance.
54.
I apologize. 54. Thank you very much. I would ask all 54 players in that field, and they probably would have a vastly different version. You're never going to come up with a consensus. So for Monahan or whoever his replacement is to make this work, it's going to have to be, here's what we're doing. No more discussion. We're going to allow, and I think Rory touched on this, again, probably better than most people, when he was asked point blank, it was very simple in him. If you have any kind of exemption on the PGA Tour as we stand right now, whether that's winning a major or whether that's career money or whatever the case may be, you should be able to use that right now. And if you don't, then you should be able to try the different pathways that everyone else has access to try to re-earn your tour card back. It's only going to make the tour better if Bryson comes back and Brooks comes back and John Rahm comes back. The idea that you need to get a pound of flesh from those players, I think that ship has sailed.